technology by itself is getting very obsolete. It's like becoming a major full-scale drone war. How do you see this changing?
The cat and mouse game between technology and anti-technology has gone on. Innovation is happening on the battlefield itself.
How much of AI, what type of AI, and what kind of robotics, even in public domain. We do not land up in a kind of a social problem where there is protests about too much of induction in technology and that is taking away jobs.
People felt that the computers will take away the jobs, but more jobs were created, in the IT field. So I would not agree with the 2 points which you made. One, that we should be wary about AI taking over the jobs. That is something, whether you like it or not. Either you can embrace technology or you can keep putting it off, but the world will change.
Question was that should we or should we not? My question was that how.
Wait. My counter question is: do we have a choice? So are we saying that if we do not develop or if we do not work towards, say, artificial general intelligence, much beyond the generative AI or LLMs which everybody is discussing today, somebody else will?
Hello viewers, we are honored to have Commodore AP Golaya VSN amongst us today. He is one of our prime mentors and also happens to be the officer who founded the Technology Development Acceleration Cell for the Indian Navy. Besides that, he has also been the former Senior Defense Specialist at the National Security Council Secretariat and also the Director of Golaya Progressive Public School at Palwal. Sir, I wanted to discuss some of the lessons that we are learning from the Ukraine war. We are seeing very accelerated technology development cycles. We are seeing that technology by itself is getting very obsolete. It's like becoming a major full-scale drone war. And how do you see this evolving and how do you see this changing the face of the warfare that we have been used to?
First of all, it's an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you for having me over. And, you asked about the lessons from the Ukraine war. Of course, the lessons are far too many, and I'm sure they're being gleaned at the right level. But I suppose you want me to speak primarily from the technology and the pace of change of technology perspective. So if I cover that, I think there are 2-3 things which are important. One is what we have seen here at this scale. I mean, it's not that it's the first time it was happening, is the use of asymmetric, if I can call it that, the drones, for example, who have made their presence felt in the battlefield. It happened earlier also, whether you're talking about the Armenia, Azerbaijan or other conflicts. But here the drones have really made their presence felt. So that's one thing. Second, we've observed, of course, that during the course of the war itself, the cat and mouse game between technology and anti-technology has gone on. Innovation is happening on the battlefield itself. So, for example, when the drones came up, thereafter the counter drones, the EW measures, the electronic warfare measures, and then the counter to that. So all this has been evolving during the course of the conflict itself. The second point which I think we need to hoist is that the numbers which are required. When we talk about, so I was looking after the Sprint initiative or the IDEX, which people talk about. So you induct based on the financial powers. So you induct a limited number. Now these limited numbers will get, if you see the numbers which have been expended per month in the conflict as it has gone on, these numbers will need to be replenished, which brings to the fore the need for a surge manufacturing capability. That implies, obviously, that it cannot be only military thing, because you have 300 drones, you have 400 drones, they will get expended if the war starts, especially if it is high-intensity warfare. And I'll come back to this point about high-intensity warfare later. But the point I was trying to make is that you need to have a capability which, when required, it does not make sense to stock up huge stockpiles of any kind of weapon or drones in anticipation. But there should be a capability to ramp up production and ramp up production fast when the need arises, which can happen either due to the dual use nature of the thing. That means the drones which are, say, agricultural drones, which can be converted also for military use. Or it can be if you have the capacity to manufacture based on your exports. So one of the 2 things will have to come in. So coming back to the point which I said about high-intensity warfare, one thing which we've seen in the recent past, not only in Russia, Ukraine, which you mentioned, But even if you talk about the thing which is going on in Israel and Hamas, so when you thought that there was a very powerful adversary and a comparatively weaker adversary, and everybody expected that the war would be over in a matter of weeks, if not days. The era of shock and awe, where a very powerful adversary just bulldozes the way through a weaker adversary. But technology being a great equalizer, what we have seen is that, now it does not cost millions and billions to have big systems. I'm not saying that the big platforms are redundant, but the asymmetric nature and the proliferation of technology, which, drones can be made by small firms. They can be made even in-house. And they have proven their utility in warfare. So that means a war, of course, there were other reasons also. The fact that, they were receiving aid, not only from Europe, but also from the US, which, there's a question mark over that now. But the fact that they could stretch on that is also because of the very low-cost weapons, which had a huge impact. The disproportionate impact of low-cost weapons with relatively lower-end technology. Technology which does not require years of R&D, which is the word jugaad we use. So jugaad was prominent on the battlefield. So all these factors combined, to me, imply that it cannot be business as usual anymore. Whether it is our, the development cycle or the procurement cycle, things will have to be accelerated and things will have to be done in a different way. And again, it's not a question of either or. Do you need big platforms or do you need asymmetric capability? I think you need both. And so it's not this or this. It's this and this. So that's something I think the planning has to go in that direction.
Sir, in your initial comments, you mentioned about the surge capacity requirements for the industry, rather from the industry to serve the military requirements. Now, there is one low-tech, high-impact, and one is high-end platforms themselves. Now, depending on the pace of warfare and the kind of attrition that is taking place, there may be a requirement to switch between both, or may have a certain combination of both. Now, given this kind of a requirement, how do you see the supply chain requirements that you need to be looked after, especially in the background of recent cases where some of the contracts were cancelled by one of the services? And how does India need to structure its supply chain and the military-industrial complex?
Okay, so your question is about the supply chain, but I'll come to that subsequently. But before that, the point which you mentioned about both kinds of platforms, the high. So let's take the example of the Air Force, for example. Do you need more, the next generation fighter jets, or do you need drones? Obviously, there's no simple answer to that. You can't say that you need drones and you don't need fighter jets. So again, or for the Navy, you can't say do you need aircraft carriers, do you need submarines, or do you need unmanned surface vessels? You need both. So it is not a question, as I said, of either this or this. In fact, there's a very interesting concept which it was written in the context of the US Navy by I think a captain rank officer who called this concept, the bimodal Navy. That means bimodal Navy is two distinct navies, one for sea control and one for sea denial. And he had mentioned in that article that this rethinking has been brought about by the emergence of China as a near peer rival. So now, in case the US Navy is seeing China as a near peer rival, in our context where, you're talking about the two-front or a 2.5-front war, and I'm not again limiting myself to the maritime domain. But if I can take this term, the bimodal Navy, and extend it further, you need both. You need the primary kind of Air Force and the sea denial kind of Air Force, if I can call it that. The bimodal aspect of it, which largely would be, so they would be low cost, they would be expendable. They would be unmanned. They cannot, human life matters. So you cannot have a manned platform and consider it expendable. So they would be the unmanned component, they would be the existing component, and they would also increasingly be teaming between the two. So you MUMTI, or the manned-unmanned teaming, which we talk about. So that is something which we will see more and more in the future. Having said that, presently, what should we focus on and what should be this thing? I think if you see even all the services, the Navy had started an unmanned squadron, as you are aware. We have the Air Force, which has now created a post of Assistant Chief of Air Staff remote. And the young officers who would be in the entire life, they would be in the unmanned branch, in the sense that they would remain only with unmanned systems. They've been inducted specifically for that. So that itself is indicative of the change in mindset. The realization that we need manned and we need unmanned both is something which is there. The shift between what do you place more emphasis on is something which I think is dynamic and it will keep changing. I'm not talking from the force structuring perspective. Of course, you have to take care of all these things, and it's very difficult to plan for the future. But if push comes to shove, or if you are actually in a war situation, then getting new platforms takes time. You cannot just suddenly say that I want 10 new ships or 2 new squadrons or 5 squadrons. But the smaller platforms, as we've seen, what we started the conversation with, even in Russia and Ukraine, the surge manufacturing can come into play much faster there. Unless it's a war which stretches on for many years, where again, even for the bigger platforms, the mobilization and this thing that will come into play. Which leads me to the second question which you'd asked, which was about the supply chain. The supply chain dependencies which we have will also determine the capability which we have for the surge in manufacturing. So that is something which we need to be aware of, we need to be wary of. Dependence on, so you'd not mention the example, but I think what you were referring to is the contract being cancelled because some Chinese components which were found. Again, I have rather different views on this. I think you have to again be clear that components which are critical, they can be no dependency on anybody else. However, something which is not critical, when I say critical, I'm talking not only from the criticality in manufacturing, but also the mission criticality. That means something which has a vulnerability in a mission is obviously not acceptable. So in that you need independence, or you cannot be dependent on anybody else. But other than that, it is not really feasible, currently at least, to be being Atmanirbhar is a aim. But there would be supply chain dependencies with various people. It's not, we're living in a globalized world. So we have to be very clear about what are the dependencies which are acceptable and what are the dependencies which are not acceptable. The dependencies which are acceptable, they have to be cross dependencies. It should never be that, we are held at ransom. If it is a mutual dependency, that means you are dependent on another country, say A, for something, but they also need you for B.
Something like a mutual interdependence.
Yes. So which means that, you can be sure that the supply chain, as you called it, would not be disrupted. So that I think is the way to go.
So very interesting, sir. Like we just spoke about the shift from the manned wars to now increasing unmanned war, and now I like to increase the those robotics on ground as well as say undersea, because all have played an important role in the Ukraine war, and we are also seeing an increased development of such unmanned capability with our northern neighbors, whether it is manned robots and they're doing gymnastics, and while they may be showing it for fun, but in the civil domain, but the militarization of it can have very, very deadly impact. And then come with that the associated technologies of AI, quantum, and swarms, and all those kind of things. Now, given this massive capability which is being built, it does appear to me that it would be a massive challenge also for us, first of all, to develop such technologies and thereafter develop it from a dual use perspective, so that when the surge requirement comes up, it is easy to call this from the industry. It can't be that overnight you develop it. And why it is difficult from the Indian context is because you can't have too many robots in public domain eating away jobs. So there is that kind of context also, that how much of AI, what type of AI, and what kind of robotics, even in public domain, so that we do not land up in a kind of a social problem where there is protests about too much of induction in technology and that is taking away jobs. So it's a very different dimension, but yes, deep down, because the industries are the same, the resources are the same. So how do we bring a balance in this is something which I think, what would be your initial thoughts?
So I would tend to both agree and disagree with you. You may remember, a few decades back when the computers were being introduced, people felt that the computers will take away the jobs, right? Because if the calculations can be done in a way, whether the computers are being introduced in the banking sector or even by the industry. So people said that, the computers will take over the job, and is that a good idea to introduce computers? So when you're discussing that about the bots today, or you're talking about artificial intelligence, the point is change is inevitable. Whether you like it or not, it will happen. So if we go back, why, I have a difference of opinion with what you said. You said that we have to be careful that the jobs are not taken away. Jobs will not be taken away. Jobs will switch. So when you introduce the computers, there is an apprehension that the computers will replace the humans and the jobs will be taken away. But more jobs were created, in the IT field. India is now, the number of jobs which are there in the service sector in the IT field is something which would never have happened if we had not introduced computers, worried that it will take over the jobs. So that's a part of the ongoing, transformation which takes place. And it's not going to happen only to us, it's going to happen the world over. So this is not something, the AI or this thing taking over the jobs is not something which is unique to India. Yes, our demography being different, we have more of a population than, but that again, I don't think is a problem, because we always talk about a demographic dividend. That means that's an asset, if correctly tapped. So that's, one of the things which even at CHAKRA you are, very aware of and targeting. So I would not really agree that we should be worried about, the jobs being taken away by bots. That in any case will happen. The second point which I want to make is, the term which apada mein afsar. That means if things are going wrong or things are changing, you find opportunity in that. I think we have a huge opportunity here. When I say we, I'm saying India as a nation has a huge opportunity, because as the world is transiting, or as warfare is transiting into the algorithmic age, everybody's at the same start line. Earlier, we had a disadvantage that people were in a 100-meter race already 60 meters ahead, and we were trying to catch up. That meant that we would always have played catch up. Now that is no longer the case. Now what we are trying to develop, and what the other countries, the leading nations in the world are trying to develop when it comes to, say, the unmanned system. So the gap between us and them has suddenly narrowed. So that, I think, you must have, there are enough articles about, the wonders which Indian startups are doing in this field. And I'm sure it will only increase. We have a huge talent pool of trained engineers. The innovative mindset is there. So let me give you an example of, the emerging technology tracker. That's the report which was published by the Australian ASPE. If you see that just 2 decades back, we were in the top 5 countries in the world, I think in 3 categories. Today, we are in the top 5 in the world. This is the future technology based on the research papers or whatever methodology they have. So out of 64 technologies which are being tracked, we are in the top 5, I think, in 46 or somewhere about there, if memory serves me right, which means that we are there. The maximum amount of research is being done. And some of the things I don't agree with, for example, since you were director ISPA, so you have worked very closely with the space startups. Now, space, again, is something which is very, very obviously dual use, right? But if you see that in the small satellite, in the 64 technologies, India is not in the top 5. That could be because you're not writing enough research papers. However, the work which is being done, you are aware of, I'm aware of, I'm sure all our viewers are aware of it. So that is something which will show results in the years to come. So I would not agree with the 2 points which you made. One, that, we should be wary about AI taking over the jobs. That is something, whether you like it or not, either you can embrace technology or you can keep putting it off, but the world will change. The pace of change of technology will only get faster. We cannot wish it away.
So my question was that should we or should we not? My question was that how do we...
My counter question is, do we have a choice?
Oh,
So are we saying that if we do not develop or if we do not work towards, say, artificial general intelligence, much beyond, the generative AI or LLMs, which everybody is discussing today, somebody else will.
Okay.
So if we don't have it and somebody else does, we already lost the war, right?
I agree with you, sir. Okay, I'll rephrase my question to get more clarity on this. What I meant is that there are two sets of requirements where we have a bulk which may not be very employable, and there is one sector which has got very, very humongous requirement of very deep tech, top level technology. Now, how do we develop a model which allows us to grow?
Which handles both.
Exactly. So that is what my essence of what I was wanting to ask you.
No, that point is taken, but my answer, which I will stick to what I gave earlier.
Yes.
So let's go back to the example of computers. So in computers, even today, you are having both the jobs which are there. In the computers, you have the very high-end, people who are involved in actually development. And you also have at the same time people who are doing the job of data entry operators, which I would say, or even coding for that matter, which is at the lower end. Coding may be taken over by AI. It is increasingly being taken over by AI. So this is a field which did not exist a few years back, right? Now, by virtue of the fact that a new technology was introduced, lots of new jobs were also created with it. And because of our demographic dividend, as we call it, or as we discussed, we were in a position to take advantage of that. Whether it was, the Y2K, where the volumes were huge, somebody had to handle it, and we could handle it because our numbers are huge. So it is not that if AI comes in and it replaces jobs, the existing jobs may get replaced, but new jobs will also be created.
Fair enough.
In those new jobs, they would be both kinds. They would be the high end and they would be low end, right? And there is scope for all kinds of jobs and all kinds of people, but you cannot say that because it may take away the job, so let's not get into this. That
part is understood.
That would be counterproductive.
Right. Now, given what we have discussed, and you have a very deep insight into what kind of infrastructure we have in the military, the industry, and the academia, where we stand today. In your views, how should India be shaping this unique MIA or military industry academia triangle, or what should I say? Should we call it a Trishul or whatever we may call it? And how do we shape this structure and how do we make it more effective than it is today, so that the real benefits should start coming in? And I would request you to, look into your TDAC initiative as to what lessons we drew from that, which could be applied here to, make our policymakers have enough ideas so that they can work towards refining this approach.
Going back to my TDAC days, you're aware, Sprint has actually succeeded, beyond what the initial expectations were. Majority of, I know the number, but I'll not quote it here. The majority of the successful IDEX cases are now 1 year of Sprint, and the remaining are, the 3 services, the Coast Guard and the 16 DPSUs combined. So one, Sprint showed that if the intent is there, it can be done. Why could Sprint succeed when, for example, this thing have not seen that kind of success? So there would be a number of reasons. One would be top-driven. Sprint initiative was launched in the first Swawalamban by the Honorable Prime Minister. In the Navy, it was totally top-driven in the sense the naval hierarchy was monitoring it. Plus, while being top-driven, the execution was delegated to a very large extent. Because in a large number of cases, there were 108 winners who were declared for Sprint. So 108 cases actually cannot be monitored. Even as OIC TDAC, I could not constantly, I was trying my best to monitor everything, to the extent I could. But unless it was delegated to the respective project officers, I don't think we could have had. So it's a question of being top-driven and yet delegated for decision-making at the appropriate level. So that is what workforce paid. But coming back to your question about, how do we energize the academia, military, the industry,
and the user. Yes.
and the military. So Trishul, as you called it,
Yes.
You can only energize something which exists. So as of now, I don't think, though we've had the in conjunction with the DRDO, all the services. Navy, we had the technology board with the DRDO, where the academia was involved. But unlike the rest of the world, where the innovation is driven primarily in the universities. So if you see, even you take the example of the Second World War, the kind of work which was going on. In quite a few cases, it was led by professors who were attached to universities. But in our case, somehow the segregation, if I can call it that, between the theoretical research and taking it to the market has been the divide has been too much. Most university projects remain theoretical, right? And even if something is developed, say, by a research agency, I'm using the term research agency, which is more broad than just a university, and they give transfer of technology to a firm to then commercialize it. When the firm goes to the user says, this is not what I wanted in the first place. So, it cannot be that everybody is working independently, and the university develops something what they think the services need, and then they give it to a firm who then approaches. So it doesn't work that way. It has to be the synergy has to be much, much more. One of the things which we started in NIIO, the Naval Innovation and Indigenization Organization, which TDAC was a part of, was something known as INSTEP. INSTEP stood for Indian Naval Students Technical Engagement Program. Which was a online internship for 5 months. If any student had a bright idea, we used to speak to them over the internet and just help them take it forward. Most of the ideas which would come from something like this would be useless. But and we were well aware that most of the ideas would be useless because the students may not have an understanding of the requirements, but there would be some bright ideas which will come from there. So we decided that it's still worth the time to engage in this. The engagement has to increase. Your question was, how do we energize this? You cannot energize something which is non-existent. As of now, I think it is non-existent. What has changed over the last few years is one, all the universities are now having, they had it earlier also, but now they're much more active, are having the incubation centers. So, I mean, if you take the IIT Delhi, then they have the FITT, or in Bombay, you have the SIGN and so on. All universities have the incubation centers. Most of these incubation centers are also the partner incubators for IDEX. The services are now, whether it is the NIIO or the Directorate of Aeronautical Design or the Army, the ADB, are also having linkages now directly with the university. DRDO is engaging with the university. So this is something which, as of now, unfortunately did not exist. It is being set up now, which is an advantage as well as a disadvantage. Disadvantage, of course, is that, we don't have anything substantial. We do have here and there in pockets. We don't have anything substantial. The advantage is, because of this, we can set it up the way we want. So I think a focused attention. We keep talking about, jointness and tri-service and all that. It has to be much beyond just tri-service. It has to be inter-ministerial and inter-agency. So you can strengthen this, but you will also have to get the, UGC on board. You will have to get the Ministry of Education will have. It cannot be just that the Ministry of Defense says that henceforth we will have good working relationship between the academy and the military. It doesn't happen. So if we talk about, say, how China is going about it, if you see the civil-military integration. So that is something which, or you take the US example, or you take the Israeli example. So that's something which we need to work on. It's there somewhat in the last 4 or 5 years. Things have changed. They need to change much more, which is something which I think we need to work on.
So organizations like CHAKRA Dialogue Foundation, which have a very rich multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral exposure of experts.
Mm-hmm.
how can we act as a binding glue in bringing these ecosystems together and make it a win-win situation for each of them, and also act as a trusted partner to all?
Difficult question to answer, but you have to first identify what is your greatest asset. I would say your greatest asset is your outreach. The number of people you know better than me. The thousands and thousands of people who are on board, either as members of the Kranti group, and this is again at all levels. Starting from students to the college professors, to serving and retired government officials. So the very fact that this is a platform where all of them can come together for exchange of ideas, I think is useful. The very fact that, I am, I was looking after innovation for the Navy before I retired. But now that I've retired, I'm engaging through quite a few startups through CHAKRA. The startups have reached out to, or through the Kranti groups, they have reached out for help. And then I obviously, help out where I can in my capacity. Now, I am one individual. There are thousands of such individuals. So, one individual doing something is difficult. All of them coming together and trying to do something, the impact would be that much more. And if you have institutional support, so I keep telling people this, whenever I introduce CHAKRA to anybody, I said, just see the list of mentors. So now if you see in your list of mentors, you've got 3 former service chiefs, 2 former deputy NSAs. Of course, I'm not even mentioning the chief mentor, which is Governor Shekhar Dutt, who has been Army officer in 71 war. He's a Gallantry Award winner. Thereafter joined the IAS, rose to the Defense Secretary, then, was a Deputy NSA. You have a former chairman of ISRO. You have a number of 2-star, 1-star, 3-star officers of the services. You have a number of officials from the police or the administrative services or diplomats. You also have a number of students, you have a number of professors. So that is the strength. So if you're saying that what is the difference we can make, I'm saying that the difference which any of these fields can individually make, when you bring all of these fields, there's a cliche. I was also in the Directorate of Net-Centric Operations when it was set up by the Navy in 2006. So when you talk about net-centric operations, when you talk about platform-centric or network-centric, you say that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Right? So now here you have a group of committed individuals who are volunteering. All of them are doing this pro bono, right? That they're volunteering the time and effort and energy towards the shared goal of nation building. Now, when all of them come together, obviously there would be some results. So I think CHAKRA has that way a huge role to play and is also well positioned to play that role. Not only in the aspects which you mentioned, but also in policy shaping, which, of course, a number of think tanks are engaged in. But that's one thing I think where you have your strength.
Thank you, sir. This was a very, very interesting talk where it was a good learning experience for me too on several counts. And I'm sure our viewers also would have gained a lot of knowledge and had insights which would help them to apply that knowledge in their professional domains. And we at the CHAKRA Dialogues Foundation look forward to engaging with you, whether you are from the industry or a government office or you're a startup or a student who is looking for margdarshan or guidance on what to do and how to apply your skills. I think
Satyam, you finished your closing remarks, but can I make just one quick point? And this is not addressed to you, this is addressed to our viewers.
Sure.
Because I'm in a double role here. I do keep taking Meet the Mentors where I'm interviewing. And here I'm being interviewed as a mentor myself. But the point which I want to make is, and this is for the viewers, that CDF or CHAKRA Dialogues Foundation is a fairly young think tank which has just been set up. It's doing some good work. But, the joke is that a think tank which does not have outreach becomes nothing more than an ink tank. So to ensure that CDF becomes a think tank which shapes policy rather than remaining an ink tank, what is important is that more and more people know about it, more and more people contribute to it. So I will just request, and I'm doing this on his behalf now, I will just request if you like this podcast or the other podcasts like this before this, please do like, share, subscribe. Your support matters. Your support counts.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It was our absolute pleasure being here.